Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on Tech Roundup for a very special episode this month. Pure IT is turning 7, and I am here to celebrate today with our fantastic co-founders who have all joined us. We have Jack Smith, Stacy King, Trent Henson, Steve Koinm, Kyle Stutzman, and Becky Reed with us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is such an awesome achievement, and thank you guys so much for being here with me today. Over these last 7 years, we have grown to serve over 130 credit unions, and we are so happy and so proud to be a part of the industry that we're in. Jack, can you take us back to how Pure IT started, how you guys all met? I mean, how did this thing even come to be?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Normally, I think if you were going to do an interview with a company and you were going to say, let me talk to the co-founder or co-founders, it would be 1 to 2 people. So I think the thing that makes us interesting as an organization is that we are very much reliant on each other for our expertise and knowledge. And it's not about one person or even just 2, it's about the team. And we serve an industry that's very team and focused like that. So it meshes well. But to talk about how we all met, it's really a funny story. So all right, I'm going to age myself, but Becky Reed, who I have now known for over 30 years, and I started out managing music stores together in the late 80s, early 90s. For those of you that remember music stores, they don't even exist anymore. And so as we were maturing and growing up, I went into IT services, and Becky went into credit unions, financial services. And we've stayed in touch all these years. And Becky became an executive at Lone Star Credit Union in Dallas, and was really trying to make a change for her credit union to grow it, to really look at the technology stack and make some big changes there. And so she reached out to me. And fortunately, when she did, I was working with Trent and Stacy. And Stacy and I have worked together for going on 25 over almost 30 years now, or 25 years, a little about 28 years, actually 28 years. And we were running a company, and I had met Trent at this is so funny to say, at a Boy Scout event for our children. And we were the only 2 people talking tech around the campfire. So we became buddies, and we started talking, and come to find out, Trent had built at the time, which is really cool. This was back in like 2008, 2009, 10 timeframe. Trent had built one of the first multi-tenant clouds in the United States, and it was really cool when he told me about it, because we both knew the industry well enough to understand that Google was about to release a cloud, and Amazon was about to release a cloud, and Microsoft was working on these things, and so we were both really excited. And so what's funny is we started working together. I was like, oh, let me start selling some of your services as part of our organization at Purity. And so we started working together a lot. Well, in that time frame, a dear friend of mine, Steve Koinm, who I had worked with previous to that, when well, I don't want to say worked with, we actually competed, but we were fond of each other. We liked each other, and we were competing in the storage space back in the 2000s. And I'd always respected Steve and loved his work and thought he always did great work. And so as we were getting into the credit union space, I was like, hey, Steve, do you want to come help us? We found this really cool industry. Becky's brought us in. And so that's how that came together. The Kyle piece to this, which is really phenomenal, was when we started with Becky, and we did such a great job for Lone Star. I mean, I'd like to think that we did, because they said, hey, have you ever thought about, Becky was like, have you ever thought about just serving credit unions? And I was like, no, actually, we haven't. And she goes, I think credit unions need what you guys do. And so I was like, let me go investigate that. So I did. And in that process, I wrote a business plan, and I put a pitch deck together. And I was pitching to some friends and that investors up in Massachusetts that I knew. And through that process, they were like, man, you have this passion for credit unions. And so does this guy, Kyle Stutzman. You've got to meet him. He is doing consulting in the space up here. He resells some of our services. And Kyle and I literally got on the phone 30 minutes later. Like it was like, I got off the phone with these guys. I got on the phone with Kyle. It was probably one of the most exciting phone calls I've ever had in my life, if I'm being honest with you guys, because it was like, I shared this thing, and somebody totally understood what I was saying and was as excited as I was and saw the same thing. And so it was like, it was a really great call. And Kyle was kind enough to say, well, hey, if there's really something there, let me fly to Houston. Let me meet with your team. I want to see if this is something I would want to be a part of. And so we were fortunate. So Well, then I call Becky and I'm like, hey, I've got this guy, Kyle. I'm really excited. He's coming to Houston. And she's like, have you ever thought about becoming a QSO? I'm like, what's a QSO? And she's like, it's a credit union services organization. And she explained to me very eloquently what that was and why it would be a potential thing for us to really think about. We were all coming from the enterprise space, with the exception of Kyle, who had been in the credit union space. I mean, he knew that world in the banking space very well. And so, so next thing I know, we're talking to Becky about Lone Star Investing. I want to say this, and Becky is probably one of the most forward-thinking people I've ever met in my entire life. She had a vision. She knew that it was needed. She explained to me why she was passionate about it. And so I was 1,000% in at that point in time. And when the credit union decided that they were in as well, and they believed in us, which was, I have to say, probably one of the biggest honors again of my life. Having a group of people really believe in our vision and our strategy for what we wanted to do as a group of people was really cool. And so I could tell you this story because it means so much to me, but I'd like to throw it over to someone else to give you their take on all this, because I think it's just such a great, compelling story, and my teammates are phenomenal. So I'll throw it up for grabs, but who wants to jump on in? Because I could.
Well, I remember where we were when that happened, because you and I were still running Purity, the company that we'd started in 2010, which is the company that we owned and represented, that did the first ever consulting opportunity with the credit union, which was Becky's credit union, Lone Star Credit Union, because she knew Jack and she needed help. She's like, can you come help me? But after all of that, and we brought Trent in, I remember we were sitting in the car. I don't know if you remember, but I was in the process of building a home with my husband, my family. And we were going to go meet with the owner of the home builder about, it was a tiny little opportunity for like a DR service for them. They needed help with disaster recovery and backups. And on the whole way there, we were on the phone with Becky, and we were sitting in the car, and Becky's like, have you ever thought of being a QSO? And we were like, QSO. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. I actually do remember that.
That sticks out to me, because that's like started the whole, from then on, all the work happened with we hired like a marketing firm and our attorney to start researching QSOs and the industry and what this could be for us. And like Jack mentioned, starting to work on a business plan, and we met Kyle and we went to a conference in New Orleans. I remember, I'll never forget that. But the other thing I'll never, ever forget, and I think we picked the 19th as our official birthday, because that was the day, Jack, that you and I went. We went to a credit union in Houston because we were going to open up our bank account, because Lone Star was going to send us $1 million and invest in us. I don't know if you remember that. We walked in, and it was actually 9/19, 2016, when we walked into a credit union here in the Houston area, and we wrote personal checks. We have a check to open the account. Remember that?
Yep.
We wrote personal checks of, I don't know, $100 each, started our bank account, and then that afternoon, Lone Star wired in $1 million, and it was like the craziest thing that had ever happened to us. So those are, like, to me, in the early days of, Pure IT and our beginning of this really awesome journey that we've been on, are like, they're fun. There's a lot of them, but those were two fun moments. I could tell some funny stories about my partners here later on too.
So Trent, you have to tell the story about what convinced you to come to Lone Star to talk to us.
Well, let me start a little bit before that. Jack had mentioned Boy Scouts. His oldest son was one of my young scouts. I'm a scout leader for quite some time, and I had never met Jack. His wife, Mandy, was the one coming to all the meetings, and I kept hearing about Jack and how busy he was. And it was almost a year later, we were actually at a camp out. I'm in my scout uniform. And Jack, I don't know if you remember, you were actually talking to another dad about SQL. And I was sitting, and we had a fire. I was sitting over to the side, and my ears perked up a little. And I remember leaning in and trying to introduce myself. And Jack looked at me and he said, nice to meet you. Well, what do you know about SQL? And I think he thought I worked on an oil rig or something. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly tiny, so maybe he drew a conclusion there. But
That's funny because I thought you were a linebacker in the NFL.
I'm geek through and through. But my answer to his question was maybe more than you think. And we started talking then and there.
And he way more than me, by the way.
Well, that may be debatable. But as we led into this whole credit union experience, I got a call from Jack, and he said, hey, a good old friend of mine had asked if I could come and help, and we talked through it a little bit. And I was interested, and I asked where it was. And he said, it's in Dallas. And my first thought was, wow, that's almost a 4-hour drive. But then I quickly looked, and there's an In-N-Out hamburger close to where they were going to be. Well, I met my wife, and I used to live in California, so I like In-N-Out hamburger. And I thought, well, at the very least, I'll get a good burger. And the union industry has been, first, a breath of fresh air, and second, where I want to spend the rest of my career. I want to be here as long as I can because I love this industry. And it really started from Becky calling Jack and Jack calling me and me finding out there's an In-N-Out hamburger nearby.
That's all it took. Food was all it took to coerce.
Yeah, exactly. What a great story, Trent. Kyle, Steve, do you have any fond memories of the origin of PRIT?
Well, I would say we got together. I got together with lunch with Jack and Stacy, and I hadn't caught up with Jack in a while, and I just thought we'd get together for things. I was starting up and doing something in another business, and this stuff had just happened, right? And really that process of let's go find some funding, let's go figure out if we can make this into a business that we could do. That got me to seeing what was going on, the idea of doing this in the credit union space. I left what it is that I was doing and joined them, and we moved into that office that you had. There was a house in the woods there.
A little bitty house, yeah.
A little bitty house that was turned into an office space, and moved in and had to move lots of boxes that your dad had been having shipped to the office there, Stacy.
Boxes full of these things?
Birthday?
Through the boxes of wine, the cases and cases of wine. He's
a big Napa fan, or was a big Napa fan.
It seems like it took months for you to actually get all that stuff and haul it home at one point. But we just came in and grabbed that office space and started going through and making the plans and figuring out what we were going to do and going from there to the other thing I remember was actually going to the Cornerstone conference where we were going to announce ourselves to the world that first time when we went and announced ourselves to the world. And I stayed up most of the night and actually built a website. So in the morning when we started, there would be a website. It was simple. It was what it was necessary in order to get something up and running and going tomorrow. But we had a website that next morning that talked about what we were going to do, how we were going to conquer the world or the credit union world, at least through this.
And people at that conference kept asking, what is Pure It? What is it?
What is it?
I love that. And Kyle, do you want to close us out today? Any final thoughts?
Well, I can share some of that beginning too. Jack shared some of the connection there. I think before that, I was been in the industry for a while, been at financial institutions, worked at a disaster recovery and kind of a community cloud place. And then I was consulting. So when Jack and I met first, and then I got to meet this whole other crazy crew from Texas, I was doing consulting with banks and credit unions, had some connections in enterprise space. And one of the things that's really difficult in this world is to find good people. And so one of the things that was a good sense right away is that there was a sense of integrity. There was a sense of wanting to do something meaningful for others, not just for themselves. And that's extremely attractive to me. I think there was some shared across the group here with everyone's experience in the enterprise space, with the many places that we've been involved in before we started Pure IT. You run into people that are there to serve themselves or are there to only make money. And you can have multiple things you do that are fun and you're passionate about. But I think the base that really attracted me to all of these people, which have become Pure IT and the culture, is that they're good people and that there's integrity and by the way, we all know we're not perfect. That's a good starting point. There's plenty of times we mess up, we don't deliver exactly what we want, but the intent and the effort to deliver on what we say we'll do and how we'll do it and to make things right when things don't go is extremely important. And that's what's kept me engaged, and I think kept all the right motivation for how we've grown. And most of our customers feel that, even in the challenging times. And I think that's what's been really special.
Well said. Well said, Kyle.
I agree.
Agreed. Thank you, Kyle. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. And don't forget to wish Pure IT a happy birthday. Thanks, guys.
Happy birthday again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.